I'm Scott Murphy. I'm an architect here at GlideFast, and I've just started a series on ServiceNow AWS Discovery. This is part 2 of that series. Last Friday, I did a part 1, which was covering how to set up a mid-server in AWS, and then set up discovery schedule so that you can discover everything inside of AWS. Well, not everything, but everything that it initially will let you do. So there's a couple of other things I'm going to cover. This week, I'm going to cover how to set up AWS Config Events to update the CMDB automatically. So it kind of negates the reason for setting up the schedule I had last week, because it'll automatically have AWS send config item changes. So I had that set up last week in the environment. I didn't realize it was running. So it's still set up. I'm going to show you how to set it up, and I'm going to take it apart as I'm doing that, because there's nothing to really show if I just show you what I've already built. So what I've already built, I'm going to take apart and then rebuild it when we get to the demo section. So I will start by showing the agenda. First, we'll do an overview of what AWS Config is. Then we'll set up ServiceNow piece of this, and then we'll go into AWS, configure it to send events to ServiceNow. After that, whenever I initially did this, I had to configure the AWS event handler in ServiceNow to handle the payload. I think originally when this was all built, you didn't have to touch the AWS event handler, but in my current case, I've had to do that. So I'll show how to do that, and I'll show you the error that I get before that happens. So there we go. And then after all this is done, we'll have questions. And anytime anyone has a question, raise your hand. It's hard for me to do the PowerPoint and all of this. So if someone could speak up, feel free to interrupt me. So what is AWS Config? It's a part of AWS that can raise events and send through REST an event over to an instance or anywhere really. But we're going to configure it to send events to ServiceNow instance, my personal instance, and then you're going to have our CMDB items that it's discovering show up real time with changes. Real time is going to be about 5-minute delay on whenever you make a change over there. It sends the message pretty much immediately, but not, necessarily as fast as you'd want. Then ServiceNow has to trigger a discovery and go across. I'll show that in the next slide. I've also included a link to the AWS config. I'll show those websites whenever I do this. So the ServiceNow documentation has a lot of stuff in it. I'm going to show you kind of a smaller version of what they show. They have some extra things they've added since I did this. The Utah documentation has some extra properties that I didn't even know about until I looked at it yesterday. So, but it's really stuff you don't have to know to set it up. It's just extra things. So I'll cover what those are, but when we get into the demo setup. Here is a Visio diagram of how this works. So like I was kind of started explaining earlier, AWS config service can send events to something. We're going to set it up to send a REST message to this scripted REST API in ServiceNow. The scripted REST API takes all the events and puts them in this cloud events table. And then there's a cloud event scheduler that will run based on this, and it will do a CMDB update. It'll go trigger a targeted CMDB discovery to that cloud resource, I guess I should say, whatever it is that's getting updated, and it will update the CMDB with that. So those two extra things that I was talking about, the system properties that I didn't know about until just the other day, they're mentioned on this Visio as well. So there's a cloud event scheduler that you can set up to do parallel. So that if you're getting a lot of configuration item changes in your environment, you would want to set this up to do parallel. I didn't have the need for that in my environment. It's just a simple PDI, and I'll just be doing one change at a time. So it's not going to slow down the system. The other property is the use response mapping. I don't know what that is. We'll have to look at the documentation on that one. And so this, I wanted to lay out how the events are processed. AWS sends an event to ServiceNow. This is just the Word version. Still the picture. Sends it to this scripted REST API. Once an AWS event is received from the cloud, it's inserts into the cloud event table. Then the cloud event handler triggers. This is the piece that I mentioned earlier in the agenda that we'll probably have to modify. Using the script include AWS event handler record, the event information gets processed by the script include in the handler script. It will then go trigger that targeted discovery. And I'll go through that script include whenever we get to that point. Demo time. Okay, let's end this PowerPoint. and get into showing you how this works and how to set it up. After the video is posted, we'll get a knowledge share. I'll probably create a knowledge article and put these documents on there. I didn't do that for the one last week yet. I never made a document for that, so I'm going to go do that. So we have a document for the mid-server piece. Emily had some documents that she was going to share with me. We're going to get together and we'll make a knowledge article to attach to the first Share the Wealth. So first we're going to go talk about the components needed to send events. It's one of the steps we're going to perform. Really, the only thing you have to do is have a user that can do this. So I'm going to go, there's my user. So you have to set up a user that has the ability to do this. So I am that user. I logged in as that user, change the password. Let me get back to my admin user. The history here. So you just set up a user. It could be anything you want. Since in the future, I'm going to be building multiple integrations, not just with AWS, but with Azure, Google G Suite, things like that. I've made a group called Cloud Integrations, and I've tied the role that you need to that. For this one specifically is the SN_CMP Cloud Event Integration role. We're going to use this user for the Amazon AWS config service to send, it's the authentication for it. So that's going to be in one of the early steps of the setup. So you have to have a user and it has to have the role cloud event integration in order to send events to the scripted REST API. Okay, so back to the document. Here's the components needed to send events. You have to set up an Amazon S3 bucket, a simple notification service topic and subscription. This is the script subscription that has the username and password that I just showed you. Set up AWS config, and then you set up an event bridge rule and an event bus. The event bus has to be turned on to send those messages. So I will cover all of those things in AWS, and we'll start with this one. So first one is create a bucket in the region that you want to record events. And then you create a topic with that type of, with the type of standard. So I have a screenshot here in this document. I'm just going to show you the tool, what I'm talking about there. So S3, so logged into my AWS and I've gone to the service S3, scalable storage. So what I'm doing by your region, you have to have a bucket set up in the region that your devices are in. So if you did have devices in several different regions, you have to have a bucket for each. Or I haven't done this yet, but you can set up some kind of aggregator that can aggregate everything from all your regions. Not that high speed on this yet. I just know how to do it for one region at a time. So that could be a later Share the Wealth whenever I get to that point to see how that works. I've got 2 buckets already. Like I said, I've already built this. So I'm going to delete these. Oh my goodness, I have to type in the name of it. Screen. There we go. Okay, I'll leave that one alone. I'll just go create a new one. Create a new bucket. They have to be unique, I guess, across everywhere, not just your environment, which is kind of weird, but that's the way they have to be. I'm going to set this up in the region, North Virginia, USA East. If I don't have any devices in there, I'll add some, and that'll be part of the demo. You seeing it work. Okay, next, ACL's disabled. I think I just went with all of the settings that came out of box with that. Double check. Create a bucket in the yeah, I didn't even show a screenshot of that. So yeah, I think I did just use default settings there. So I'll have this new bucket created. So that was pretty simple. You just name it basically, and then click next. Next step would be to create a SNS service topic. So I'm going to go over to that now, and that is a service over here called Simple Notification Service. Here's my topics that I already have in here. I will go ahead and create a new one. Actually, let me turn these off because they may interfere with me doing this because they'll be sending messages too. So let's create a topic. You get 2 choices, first in, first out, or standard. for this purpose, we're going to do standard. It allows for the subscription protocol HTTP, which is what we're going to be using. And then you name your topic. You can give it additional name if you want. Other than that, that's it. You just name it, make it a standard, and that's it. I never changed any of these other things. Next, we need to create a subscription. And when we do that, we are going to use HTTPS. We're going to set their endpoint, and that is a URL that I hope I have in here that I can paste in. This is what the URL should look like. The HTTPS, your username that you're going to use, colon, the password you're going to use, and your instance name, and then API now cloud event. And that should be it. You set all those things. I didn't do anything else for that. So you just pick your topic, or your topic that you just created. You did that already, HTTPS, and then you're in. Create the subscription. So when you do that, it immediately sends out an API call to your instance to get validated. So we're going to give it 10 seconds or so, and we're going to refresh it. The status is now pending confirmation. It will change to something else whenever it works, or if it doesn't. Perfect, it didn't work. So we can look at cloud events over here to see if that came through. It did not. Because these generated passwords have funky characters in them, whenever you put that in that URL, they don't work. So I have to log in to that user. I'm kind of glad this happened because I had to show you this. Okay, back over here, do this again. Oh yeah, Chris asked, in order to set up the subscription to the event, do you need to verify that on your endpoint? Yes, it will automatically do that. That's what we're trying to get. Okay, it worked. So I must have fat fingered the password earlier when I reset it before the call. So yeah, now I'm going to go show it automatically replied and accepted that confirmation. So Chris, you were right. That is what was happening behind the scenes. Now I should be able to go to my cloud event and see the subscription confirmation. So there we go. This is the payload we received. And whenever this payload was received, the event handler that I was talking about earlier grabbed this. It went through that script include, and I'll cover that at the end. I'll show you the logic for this and the logic for the configuration item changes that come through. But basically, this payload came in, and then it recognized it and sent the confirmation back to AWS confirming the subscription. But that's done automatically. So it's not something you have to click on and do. You just have to have the right password for the user and the permissions. I demonstrated that well. Okay, so that's that next step is configured for it. So it can now send events to us successfully. Now we have to configure in AWS the events to be sent. So what do we want to send? There's tons of things you can send from AWS. We're just going to focus on configuration item changes. That's all we care about in this scope. The next thing we're going to do is go into AWS config and use the bucket from step 1 to topic from step 2. And you should do this all in the same region that we set all this up in before. So I was in, this is in, go back, Ohio, East, US East Ohio. So we're gonna go over here and make sure when I go to config, I'm calling it AWS config, but its name is just config. So that can be confusing to someone. We go to settings, okay. Okay, by default, this is off. You have to click edit, enable recording, and then you set all of the things in here to what we had earlier. So let's start from the top. I don't think any of this was changed. No, it's retention of how long you want the messages to be kept. Here, you're going to choose a bucket from your account. I made that new one, so we're going to use that new bucket. And string configuration changes to choose a topic from another account. Yes, it may be from another account. SNS topic on. Okay. We're going to choose a topic from my account. That's the one I just created, share the wealth demo. Then if you'll see at the bottom, the next step, you need to configure a AWS CloudWatch event rule. Well, that changed. When you go click on this, it's like, no, it's Event Bridge is what it's called now. So that's the next step. We'll have to do that next. So I'm going to save this. And the whole purpose of this was to turn on the recorder to record these messages. And you're telling it where it wants to send them. And because I can't, yeah, okay, to the bucket. So I must have messed up my bucket configuration. See, it says there's not sufficient privileges on the bucket. So I must have skipped over something there. Let's look over here. And permissions. Block all public access. I bet it has something to do with that. We'll turn that off. Let's go back to config, settings. We'll have to edit this and pick our new bucket and our new topic. Oh man, okay, so same thing. You know, undo what I just did there. The other bucket had it on, so let me look down. Oh, there's no policy. There we go. That was it. We'll go set the policy then. I think whenever you do this the first time, it automatically generates this policy. Yeah, it does. So I have to figure out the number. Okay, there we go. So that was little stuff that I had to do. I don't have any of that documented. I never had to do that before. I think because the first time you do it, like I said, it takes care of that for you. When you create a second one, you do have to do that. So that was adding permissions. This is AWS code stuff. I don't really know. I can't explain it very well other than to say that, I mean, you're configuring a resource and telling it what it can access. I don't even know what language this is exactly in. Well, it's JSON, but it's configuring the permissions that it has. Now, let's go see if it worked. I'm pretty sure it did because I kind of remember having to do this when I made my second bucket earlier, but I didn't document it. So I'll put that in my document next for troubleshooting steps. So where was I? I was in config. I was just trying to change it to the new bucket and topic. Oh, he said the region. Yeah, we figured out. So sorry, I was late to that response. Okay, so we go to settings and we go to edit and we want to change it to our new bucket, our new topic, and it should save. Yay, we can move on. Okay. So we've set up the bucket, we've set up the topic and subscription to the instance. We've set up AWS config to record the events into the bucket and for that topic. Next is the event bridge rule. So you go define a rule in the event bridge. So let's go over there to that. Amazon Event Bridge. And then over here, we go to rules. I've already got some in here. I think this was my original one. Burn it down. These other things are system created. I'm not sure exactly what they are for, but they were there whenever I got here. Okay, we're gonna use default here. This is, we're gonna define the pattern for this. Let's see, rule and event pattern, yes. Okay, we'll leave that alone up there. This is optional. This just kind of lets you see the JSON response of what it's going to look like. We want config item change. That's the event. I don't think you have to necessarily pick this, but this is just a sample event so you can see it. So this is the structure with which we're going to get messages whenever a configuration item change comes in. Part of the reason the way I knew to fix the AWS event handler in ServiceNow was the payload that we're receiving didn't match how the script include was expecting the payload to be. So that's why I had to go change that. And I'll detail that a little bit later, but this was the key. The payload that we're getting, this is the way it's expected to come in. It'll be sent to us from. You can copy it if you want, look at it out in another way if you want to. So next we're going to pick this is us picking how we want to get it. So that's basically, we just saw a sample of it. There we go. So this is it telling it that's what it wants to use. And that is it. Next. The target should be AWS service. You pick your topic. Okay. I'm going to pick the topic demo. Next. Configure tags. I didn't make one. And there we go. Review everything that we just did and create the rule. Bingo. You need to go make sure your event bus is activated. Start discovery will activate it. So yeah, so event buses, there's just a default one that was already here. I didn't create this thing. So you go to it, and I already have it running because I've already set it up, but originally it's in this state here, not initiated. You just click start discovery to make it start doing that. Okay. I think we're ready to show you how it works. I have a link here, instructions how to set up AWS. Oh, I do. Okay, good. I have documentation that shows you how to do this across regions. So it's actually from Amazon. So they've got a method where you can set it up across many regions. I wouldn't want to have to do this for every region that I have devices in, right? To keep it simple and share the wealth, I just want to cover one. But in reality, the client is going to want to do this one time and kind of share it across all the regions and have them all funnel to the same instance, probably. So the only reason they wouldn't want to do that is if they had multiple instances of ServiceNow, which would be crazy. And now I can go into ServiceNow / AWS and make changes to things or make new things. And there we go. So look, there's some of the stuff I just did showing up. So we're getting messages for this new setup. So I am going to go show me creating a thing. Let's go do a server. Okay, I don't have any instances running. I'm still in this, yeah, Ohio. Okay. Let's create an instance. We'll create a Linux. We don't have to log into it. So it doesn't really matter. Just something, making sure I'm doing free tier eligible stuff. Pretty much whatever is already there. You don't have to change anything. Should be good. Go bounce back and forth between ServiceNow and this to see when it actually sends messages. Yeah, I've just realized my fix for the event handler is already in place. So I'll go show you the original one versus mine so you can see the difference. It was US East 2. Yep. Okay. We're in the same region. I'm thinking maybe, I don't know, I'm gonna just keep changing it to see if you turn it off, turn it on, maybe it'll, I thought creation went through, maybe it does not. But I could have swore whenever I set all this up, if you create something, a creation of something shows up over there. But maybe it's just changes. And so this is a change, me stopping it. I know that for sure shows up. Maybe it was just delayed. I can look at the message to see if it was creation or not, but here it is showing up in here. Oh, so it already triggered a discovery. So there's the instance right there, I think. This is the resource ID that is processing. So that's running right now. Like I said, it's not real time. It's just close. Especially when you pick that topic of standard. It is, first in, first out is what it's, or no, it's not first in, first out. What I'm talking about is the speed at which Amazon will send it. I think this was that I was looking at. Standard is slower. First in, first out is quicker, but it's a different kind of message type. So I've never tried that method. I've only done the standard one. So as it gets all of these messages in, processes them, it creates a little mini discovery and tries to discover each little piece that it got. So we should now be able to see, okay, yeah, so discovery is finished. This is the resource ID that came in. It's the actual virtual server. See, I made a EC2 instance. These are all the pieces of it that came in, right? There's all kinds of other things that go with it. But here it is. So I'll go to that configuration item and show you. Here it is. So it is seeing it as state is off. I think it's because I turned it off while it was doing discovery, but we can re-trigger all of this again by me going over and turning it back on. So I did want to show that too. That was part of it. I wanted to show that you make a change, it does do that. So it is off. We'll turn it on. Since that might take a few minutes, I'll get into the event handler and show you the second piece of this. So done with AWS config. Here's the AWS event handler document. Okay, first I'll talk through some of this. I think I mentioned how they're processed before. Why does the AWS event handler need to be changed? I'm going to cover that by showing you the two script includes, the out-of-box one versus mine, and then we'll go from there. So go over, actually, I'm going to go to it, but I also want to go to the very beginning of this. So I want to show you the scripted REST API, the code for that. So let's find the cloud one. So this is the API that we configured AWS to send events to. So I just want to go into it, show you some of the code inside of there, just so you can follow along the path with the code, not just the Visio. So there we go. So this is showing when it gets a post, gets the payload, separates out some variables, and then it creates a record into the SNEP cloud event table, which I was just looking at and refreshing. So I think that was over. Oh, look, see, this is on now. So that automatically happened. It took over and now it's showing this is on. So yeah, so this is the cloud event table right here. So this is where all the events populate. So AWS sends it, this scripted REST API processes it, puts it there. I don't know what causes it to use the event handler. I haven't seen any, unless it's embedded somewhere. I haven't seen a flow. I haven't seen a business rule. I haven't been able to track that part down. I just know that this event handler is what processes or handles anything that goes into that table. I thought, I could be able to track it down by looking at business rules or something else like that, but so far I haven't. And I just know that it works. So I know this thing processes it. So this is here. This is an out-of-box thing that was here. It just had a different handler script. So the other script, I think, was just AWS event handler. Oh, I made a different one. Okay, so that was what was originally here, was AWS event handler. So depending on your payload, this is something you should be able to configure for yourself, right? Because you might have different payloads, a reason to have a payload different than what ServiceNow is expecting. In this case, ServiceNow just didn't have it didn't support the way configuration item change was out of the box. And so I can open up that script include, open up the handler custom one, and kind of explain the differences. It'll be super technical, but we're going to go down that road. It is something I had to do. And so you do all the stuff I just did and it didn't work, the AWS event handler will be the issue. If you see events that are coming in and they don't work, that could be why. And so I guess what I could do to show that is to change it back to the original, show you the error that you do get. Clicking around a lot, let me find where I was. do that. We're gonna go trigger this thing to turn off. Stop. Okay, so that's trigger another message to come through. While that's coming through and not processing, you should come in here and like give an error whenever it gets that. We'll have that to look at. So where was I going? Script includes. Okay, let me open that up over here. There we go. Okay. So this, I think, basically only has one function and a couple sub functions. Yeah, okay. So there's the process event. First thing it's going to do, I kind of would help if I look at the JSON that we're getting. So I'll pull up a JSON. But the first thing it's going to do is come in here and start parsing that JSON. Checking the account, cloud account, making sure it is a cloud account that you actually own. So last week we set up the cloud account in the system. Going to go validate that that is a true cloud account in your system. So that's what it's doing here at the very beginning. Then it looks at the subject and type of the message and figures out if it's a subscription confirmation. Remember we talked about that earlier. This is where it has the auto subscribe functionality for the subscription confirmation. Again, this is all out of the box. This was written already for us as part of the application. So this part is like that. And then here's the configuration item change type. That's in the payload. Whenever we go inspect that payload that we're getting, you'll see that in there. And so I think where we started having issues was right around here in these lines where it was looking at the message, getting the configuration item, resource type, a lot of these things is where it fails because the JSON is missing a layer. It's called detail. So if I go over here to my modified one, I'll look down through here. And when I get back to configuration item change, there, line 72, yes. So message.detail configuration item. So detail was not in there, but it is a piece that's part of the payload. So I'll go show you the payload now. These are messed up. So let's look at them. I'm going to grab this payload. Let's make it beautiful. It's not beautiful. This is not the one I usually use. There. Wait a minute. Oh, I may have gotten the I did put it inside the brackets at the top. Yeah. Okay. This is in a different type of JSON format. It's got the slashes. It really threw me off when I first looked at it. It made it really hard to read. So I don't know. This is another way of notating JSON with these slashes and quotes. I don't remember. I just had to kind of look at it and see that whenever you got to the layer in here for messages, body.message, chat, someone said something. Can do a parse on that, then a stringify with null /t. In the code, yes. Okay, yeah. I don't know how to beautify it other than that. But let's try to find the body.message and the detail property. So here's the message. And then we have detail type. The script is looking at things like this to determine how to process it. I think that's what I might do though, Chris. I might put it in a background script. I may have done that whenever I looked at this. I'm running out of time here. So I do want to open up some questions, but basically took this jumbled mess and found out that there's a layer. I think this is it right here. It is a layer that I had to go put into that. And so that's really it. That's really all I did. I just added .detail after message and I had to do that several places that you could see message. And that's really all I have to change to make the event handler. I do have the code that I changed right here. And I gave instructions to the client with this document and said, hey, go make this custom script include. And I gave them the code here to put in there. So I didn't actually do this for them, but here's the instructions for that. So I'll have this document out there if anyone needs to reuse that code. you can. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the last step. And that was just me showing that, the out-of-box one don't work. The modification I made by adding the extra .detail after message everywhere that is, that made it work. So if anyone's ever tried this following the instructions that are all out there, it probably failed right here. Because using the ServiceNow instructions, that got me to this point, and then I had to go figure this part out. Well, next week, I'm going to show how to do Kubernetes discovery. It's kind of very involved too. It's a lot of, you got to know what Kubernetes is. If you do, great. I'm going to have an introduction to what it is, what I understand it to be, and then I'll show you how to set up ServiceNow to discover that. It's a lot of setup in AWS, so it's just probably very few things you have to do in ServiceNow to get it to work. We've already done all the work we've done builds on the next thing. So that's what I wanted to do with Kubernetes. It's just another layer of things. That's why the series was 1, 2, and 3 like this, is so that I don't have to go repeat everything every time I do a share the wealth on AWS. So if you were lost in this one, go back and watch Share the Wealth #1, and you'll be able to understand a little bit more of the context of where I started off at in Share the Wealth #2. And then the same thing for 3. I think 3, this session doesn't really matter as much. It's just an extension of 1. So it's not related to this piece at all. But if you make changes in Kubernetes, it should show up because we did.